Writing. The key was still warm in my hand when I opened the cabin door and found a woman already unpacking her clothes. For a few seconds, I honestly wondered if I had driven to the wrong place. The address on my phone was correct. The lake outside the windows was exactly the one shown in the auction photographs. Even the stone fireplace matched the picture. But there she stood beside an open suitcase, holding a folded sweater, staring at me with the same confusion I felt. I had won this weekend getaway at a charity auction that afternoon. She clearly believed it belonged to her. And neither of us knew yet that the mistake that brought us together would change both our lives. My name is Daniel, and I wasn't supposed to win anything that night. I had gone to the charity auction because my late brother's name was attached to one of the medical programs being funded. He had spent years volunteering for children who couldn't afford treatment, and after losing him, supporting that charity became one of the few ways I felt close to him. I wasn't wealthy. I worked as a maintenance supervisor at a community hospital, paid my bills carefully, and rarely spent money on myself. When the mountain cabin weekend appeared on the auction screen, I jokingly raised my number. Then someone else raised theirs. I raised mine again without thinking. Suddenly the room applauded, and I realized I had actually won. The cabin was supposed to be my first real break in years. I had imagined sleeping late, sitting beside the lake, reading by the fireplace, and finally allowing myself to stop worrying about everyone else. But when I opened that door and saw the stranger, all those plans disappeared. Her name was Emily. She looked exhausted, startled, and embarrassed. She explained that she had received confirmation from the same charity that the cabin was available to her for the weekend. She had already driven several hours and was in the middle of unpacking when I arrived. I called the charity immediately. After several confusing minutes, the truth became clear. Someone at the organization had accidentally assigned the same cabin to both of us. They apologized and promised to find another place for me. I expected Emily to be relieved. Instead, she quietly offered to leave and sleep in her car if necessary. There was something about the way she said it that stopped me. She wasn't angry. She wasn't demanding anything. She simply looked like someone who had already learned not to expect life to make room for her. If you believe kindness and second chances can change someone's life, please take a moment to like this story, share it with someone who needs a little hope, and subscribe to the channel. Sometimes the smallest act of understanding becomes the beginning of a story we never expected to live. I told Emily she could stay. The cabin had 2 bedrooms, and I could take the smaller one. She tried to argue, but I explained that I had nowhere urgent to be and that she had clearly needed the cabin more than I did. What I didn't tell her was that I recognized the look in her eyes. It was the same look I had carried after my brother died, when everyone told me I would eventually feel better, but nobody understood that grief doesn't disappear simply because time passes. The first evening was awkward. We cooked separately and stayed mostly in different rooms. Outside, the lake reflected the orange light of sunset, and a cold wind moved through the trees. Then the weather changed. Rain began striking the windows, followed by thunder that seemed to shake the entire cabin. The electricity went out just as we were preparing dinner. With nothing else to do, we lit the fireplace and sat on opposite sides of the room. Eventually, the silence broke. Emily told me she worked as a nurse at a small rehabilitation center. The medical bag sitting beside her suitcase suddenly made sense. She had come to the cabin because she had reached a breaking point. Her mother had recently passed away after a long illness, and Emily had spent years caring for her while working full-time. After the funeral, she discovered that the apartment she had shared with her mother was being sold. She had been moving between friends' homes and sleeping wherever she could. The charity had arranged the cabin because someone at her workplace knew she desperately needed a safe place to breathe. I understood then why she had been unpacking so quickly. She hadn't been excited about a vacation. She had been trying to believe, even for one weekend, that she was safe. I told her about my brother. I told her how I had avoided taking vacations because every peaceful moment seemed to remind me that he wasn't there to share it. Emily didn't try to give me advice. She simply listened. That mattered more than I expected. The next morning, the storm had passed. Sunlight filled the cabin, revealing the calm blue lake outside. Emily was standing in the kitchen, carefully folding her clothes back into the suitcase. She said she had decided to leave because she didn't want to take advantage of my generosity. I stopped her. I told her that sometimes people don't need someone to fix their problems. Sometimes they just need one place where they don't have to pretend everything is okay. We spent the day walking around the lake. We talked about ordinary things, childhood memories, terrible coffee, difficult bosses, and the strange ways people survive heartbreak. For the first time in years, I laughed without feeling guilty afterward. On Sunday afternoon, the charity called again. They had found the source of the mistake. More importantly, after hearing what had happened, several donors offered money to create an emergency housing program for medical workers and caregivers facing sudden hardship. Emily had unknowingly become the reason that program existed. She cried when she heard. I didn't know how to comfort her, so I simply stood nearby and let her have the moment. Before we left, she placed a small photograph on the kitchen counter. It was a picture of her mother sitting beside the same lake years earlier. She had discovered it in an old box while packing. She told me her mother had always wanted to visit the cabin but never had the chance. That weekend, Emily had finally done it for her. Months passed. The charity's new emergency housing program grew quickly. Emily volunteered to help organize it, and I donated some of my vacation savings to support the project. We stayed in touch, but neither of us tried to force the friendship into something it wasn't. We had met during a mistake, and somehow the mistake had given both of us something we desperately needed, proof that life could still contain unexpected kindness. 1 year later, I returned to the cabin for another charity event. When I opened the door, I saw 2 bags beside the fireplace. For a moment, I laughed because I remembered the first time I had seen luggage there. Emily walked in behind me, smiling. This time, there was no mistake. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes that kindness still matters, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need a reminder that their hardest chapter doesn't have to be their final one. And before the final line, I have one special request. Comment, kindness can change everything, if you believe one small act of compassion can completely change the direction of someone's life. I thought I had won a weekend getaway that night. I was wrong. I had won something far more valuable. I had won the chance to meet someone who reminded me that grief doesn't mean life is over, loneliness doesn't mean we're forgotten, and sometimes the wrong door leads us to exactly the person we were meant to find.